Hey everyone. Yeah, it's almost 12:30, so thought I'd do this. I just downloaded and watched bits and pieces. Well, watched certain things, kind of skimmed through Bound for Glory, if you will. And I don't know what arena they were in outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, but apparently they didn't sell it out. I mean, they had a decent crowd, don't get me wrong about that. It looked a lot better than what's been reported over the past few days. But there's a reason for that. You want to know what that reason is? Well, first of all, I want to apologize if this thing goes off prematurely and I have to redo this. Or I have to do it in separate parts. But you want to know what that real reason is? It's because TNA knew that they had a main event that people have seen already on Impact. People have already seen the main event on Impact. It's pretty much a match that's, as some people would say, would be Impact worthy. And obviously they heard the criticism from a lot of people indicating that this was not going to be a match that was going to draw people to the arena or draw people to even order the pay-per-view. Now, I'm not saying people haven't ordered the pay-per-view, they did. I might even consider recording the thing by ordering it as well. I just got to look at the price. But the reason, in my opinion, they had a decent, more larger crowd last night was due to the fact that they switched up the main event. You see, I thought about this for a while. You know, I do pay attention to TNA. I try to follow what they're doing at times. And I know one of the major storylines they had going into it was Matt Hardy, EC3, Jeff Hardy storyline rivalry. And I pretty much thought to myself a few weeks ago that the only way they're going to sell out North Carolina, well, not a few weeks ago, but maybe a few months ago when it was announced they were going to go to Charlotte, I said to myself, or the Charlotte area, I said to myself, the only way they're going to sell out that venue that they're going to be at is if they have one of the Hardys in the main event. And that's exactly what happened. I'm sure I'm not the only one that thought about that. But when you take a look at how much they were pushing Jeff and they were pushing Matt into their main event scene, into the world title picture, it's like you couldn't think of a better place to do it. Now, had they done Bound for Glory like they had done with Slammiversary, had they done it at the Impact Zone, yeah, they'd have a decent crowd. They'd have a fairly decent crowd, bigger budget, a better production and budget to work with. They would have a better looking crowd. However, due to the fact that I guess they're trying to reset themselves again, reboot themselves again, TNA decided that the best thing to do for Bound for Glory is to go on the road with it. Now, I'm not saying that wasn't a bad idea. I'm not saying that wasn't a bad idea. What I'm saying is I think they realized that the only way they were going to get a decent sized enough crowd, or a decent sized enough crowd at that event, was to put the Hardys in the main event. You see, let me put it to you like this. See, WWE, they realized that if someone's red hot, and you're going to have a pay-per-view, one of your marquee pay-per-views, or even one of your B-level pay-per-views, in their home state, particularly in their backyard, if you will, then you're going to want to do whatever it takes to highlight that person in a big spot. Whether they're the main event of the first hour, or they're part of the main event to close of the second hour, or they're part of the main event that closes out the show. You want to do whatever it takes to highlight that person so that the people that come to that arena or even those that have to stay at home and order it, will know, hey, we got our money's worth. And hey, this was a good idea, this was a good plan on their part to draw us to the arena, because they know that if they didn't do this, they wouldn't have a decent sized crowd, they wouldn't have decent buy rates or viewers or subscribers or whatever. So with that said, as much as TNA has a lot of things going against it, and believe me, it does, TNA did the smart thing in at least getting themselves a decent sized crowd by adding Matt and Jeff into the main event. Jeff as the referee, Matt as one of the challengers, eventual champion. But here's what really gets me about TNA. If they knew that they were going to have this problem in the first place, why didn't they just put Matt Hardy in Drew Galloway's place? Make Matt Hardy one of the centric figures of this feud with GFW. You see, to me, the feud with GFW had potential. And I think one of the ideas maybe Jeff or Kaborik had was, hey, let's have EC3, Dixie's own nephew, the TNA World Champion, turn his back on the company like Eric Young did, join up with GFW, and then probably be one of the two, and then afterwards be, along with Eric, one of the two turncoats that's going to have everything against them. And thus, you could have Matt in that position where he kind of represented TNA, and you kind of get the idea, and away you go. Would have made more sense. I mean, it would have made a lot of sense, if you will, if Bound for Glory was in Scotland or even the UK. Don't get me wrong, it would have made a lot more sense had Bound for Glory been in the UK or Scotland. It would have been. But you know, I'll give credit where credit is due for TNA. At least this year's Bound for Glory was a vast improvement. A vast improvement over last year's. I saw last year's Bound for Glory. And to me, that was as much as I give TNA credit for trying to do what WWE will not do at WrestleMania and take it overseas to a place like Japan, at least I will give TNA credit that they took their WrestleMania Bound for Glory over to Japan. What I won't give them credit for is the fact that it was a Bound for Glory that was probably looked at as the most pathetic in the series. I mean, basically, it was a Wrestle One show with TNA stars. That's what it was. It was a Wrestle One show. That's all it was. It was a cross promotion between Wrestle One and TNA, and it didn't work. It didn't. It did not work. It was basically a Wrestle One show. And how is it looked at as a Wrestle One show? Take a look at the main event last year compared to this year. This year's was at least a decent, more vastly improved Bound for Glory than last year's. Last year's Bound for Glory ended on a tag team main event with Tajiri and the Great Muta, all due respect to Muta, he's a legend, against James Storm and Sonata? You know, if you're going to do that, you should have at least made Tajiri and Muta the Wrestle One Tag Team Champions, or even, if you had to storyline-wise, have James Storm and Sonata go to Japan, become the Wrestle One Tag Team Champions, and then that could have made it more credible. Because at least you would have Tajiri and Muta trying to win back the titles and bring them back to Wrestle One. But they didn't do that. They didn't do that, and to me, that kind of hurts when you don't do that kind of stuff. I mean, what was the only championship they had on the line there? What? The Knockouts Championship, which was held by Havoc, Jessica Havoc? And where's she now? She's gone from TNA. She's probably on the verge of going to WWE. I mean, when you look at TNA's Bound for Glory pay-per-view series, You compare this one to last year, and you can see the vast improvement. You can see that TNA did the right thing this year compared to last year. And that's saying a lot for TNA. That's saying a lot. But again, as much as some of us may not like to give them credit, they did two smart things this year. One, they kept Bound for Glory in the States. Two, they understood that if they didn't have somebody from the Carolinas, in this case the Hardys, being in the main event, that they were going to have a less crowded, probably the lowest attended Bound for Glory in history. I mean, everybody was reporting, oh, you should have looked at the attendance at Salem. You should have looked at the attendance in this town. Everybody's saying it was pathetic. Okay, fine. Maybe not the way they wanted, but true. But at least they had a decent-sized one here. One, why? Again, because they were in the Hardys' backyard, so to speak. But the question is, folks, the question is, can TNA improve? You know, like I said, Bound for Glory from last year to this year is a huge, vast improvement. I mean, last year when one looks at it, Bound for Glory was just nothing more than, like I say, Wrestle One. It was a Wrestle One house show featuring TNA stars. That's what it was. It was a Wrestle One house show, live event featuring TNA stars. It was. And I think, from what I understand, maybe I'm wrong, but it was also broadcasted over there in Japan as a Wrestle One show. You know, TNA last year promoted Bound for Glory being in Japan as a big thing, and yet, what did we get? We got one championship match. Everything else was like a regular live event. It was stupid. It was pathetic. It was a nice try, like I mentioned earlier. Give them props for trying to at least doing what WWE wouldn't do. But still, it wasn't enough. And it came out as pathetic. I mean, even the Schleg Daddy and several people from Kevin Castle, Don Tony, Solomonster, Deluxe Man, everybody came out afterwards. Bill Apter, everyone came out and said that last year's Bound for Glory was pathetic. It was a nice try, but it was pathetic. It came off bad. And why did it come off bad? Why? Here's why. Several things that I will admit they vastly improved on with this year's. Last year, Jessica Havoc was the TNA Knockouts champion. Problem was, she had lost that championship about a week or two before the Bound for Glory event at an Impact taping. Yeah, she lost it. She lost it, I think, to Velvet, I can't really remember. But she lost the Knockouts title. So what happens? Huh? She loses the Knockouts championship, but yet she's still being promoted as the Knockouts champion, and she's defending the belt against Velvet, or whoever it was. I don't know if it was Velvet she lost to, or whoever it was she lost the belt to a few weeks prior. But she was still being advertised over there to defend the title. So what happens? She has to go over there and defend the championship, a championship she lost. Which basically made her match meaningless and pathetic. And when you take a look, again, at how it was promoted, you think they would have done a better job. True, Bound for Glory this year may have been on short notice in the eyes of some, and it was. That's one thing they got to work on, though. They got to really work on promoting the big events if they're going to keep going for the next year or two. They got to do a better way of promoting their events and getting people to come to them. That's one thing they should improve on in 2016. Second of all, you know, TNA had been last year promoted Bound for Glory in Japan for for several months. But yet, the payoff was pathetic. Here, at least in the short term, we got a decent payoff. And I'm sure some fans may or may not agree with that, but you could tell there was a vast improvement. What I'm trying to get at is TNA, whether you like them or not, and I've had my choice words about them, everybody else has, they have shown at times that they are trying to improve. Not greatly though, I'll give you that. They haven't really shown that they can improve greatly. But they are slowly trying to, I guess in their eyes, improve step by step. They're trying to take those baby steps again. But you know what? I'll say this. Bound for Glory this year wasn't without its problems. And these are things that TNA needs to work on if they want to get a television deal with another network or channel. Or even get a deal with something like Hulu, Netflix, or YouTube. What TNA needs to do is really work on their audio. People said that the audio and stuff for Slammiversary was bad. Well, guess what? The audio here for the Bound for Glory pay-per-view wasn't as good either. I mean, heck, you had Anderson doing this, waiting for the freaking mic to drop. No mic dropped. He had to freaking improvise when he got to the ring. It's like, what happened? And then, when Christie is introducing Kurt Angle for his match, all you hear is, all you hear is a Angle, and it's like, okay, what happened? The audio, they really need to work on the audio. And they need to take and yes, they need to take baby steps, but they need to be very big baby steps. Not slow, tiny little baby steps. They got to be big. And what I mean by big, it's like you taking your first step as a baby, and then you take another big step, and you keep practicing. These are your baby steps. You're not doing this. You're not going. You're not doing this. You're not going. Do I step? No, your baby steps have to be big, large, and loud. They got to be boom, boom. You can't be like, do I step or do I not step? They got to take those big, huge baby steps. They got to make them big and loud to the point that at least people will say, okay, they're trying. They're making an effort. I mean, let's face facts. 2015 has not been a good year so far for TNA. It's not been. How many pay-per-views have they had this year? What, 2, 3? That's it? 2 at most? I mean, the freaking Lethal Lockdown, they had to dedicate 2 episodes of Impact to. And that's one of your big 4 or big 3s for your company? And you have to dedicate an episode or 2 of Impact just to do it? I mean, again, I'm not trying to say TNA isn't attempting to reconstitute themselves. I'm not saying that TNA is not trying to reinvent themselves, trying to reboot themselves. What I'm saying is TNA needs to really start taking things seriously. They need to start taking those big baby steps towards that improvement. And here's some of the things they could do. TNA, in my opinion, if you're going to do live events, don't try to sell out big arenas or anything, or